Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kurt. So, quick overview on the Salton Sea. So the Civic student had a page called Current Information on the Salton Sea. And as of yesterday, the elevation of the Salton Sea was 237.8 feet below sea level. It's about 210,000 acres, roughly 320 square miles right now, and about 5.1 million acres. So it's down about 2 million acre feet of volume in the past 15, 16 years since the USA was signed. It's dropped roughly 9 feet since this day 16 years ago. So when I originally was trying to structure the agenda for the conference, I thought hydrology is foundational. Water is what determines what's happening at the Salton Sea, both quantity and quality. We need a full day just to talk about hydrology. But it turns out we also need to talk about ecology, we also need to talk about air quality, we need to talk about what the state and local entities are planning for the Salton Sea. So regrettably, this panel has been really shortened. And I apologize to my panelists for not giving them as much time as they all deserve. The good news is we have a really esteemed panel with us from a variety of different perspectives. Each and every one of them has a PhD, except for me. And represent Sujoy's working for a consultant who's been working with the Salton Sea Authority in the state for many years. Hoori is an academic at UC Riverside, bringing a modeling perspective to this. And Doug Barnum worked for a federal agency, along with Val Simon, who's out in the audience. Doug and Val had the only actual habitat project at the Salton Sea from 2006 to 2010, so it brings a wealth of real-world experience to speak to Salton Sea issues. So each of their bios are posted online on our conference website, Salton Sea Summit.org. Feel free to check that out. There's detailed biographies for each of them. And I'm going to allow them to give their full presentations without spending more time on the biographies now. So I figure out how to post the presentation up. Ajami or Tom will help us with that. Without further ado, Sujoy Roy.
Thank you, Mike. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for being at this really well-attended summit. And I'm honored to be talking about hydrology, which, as Mike said, is foundational to all of the planning. And I want to be, in the interest of the time allocated to me and to our panel in general, I want to focus in on a very specific aspect of the hydrology, which is the recent flows. What have they looked like, and what are they expected to look like in the next few years? And the reason this is important is because the Salton Sea Management Program, and my firm Tetra Tech is a consultant in the Department of Water Resources. The Salton Sea Management Program has a very specific near-term goal of creating new habitat on exposed playa. So there is a need to understand what that playa is going to be like, what those areas will be like, not just long term, but in the next 2, 3, 4 years, and also what the flows will be like in the rivers, so that one can make an assessment of the inflows compared to the water demands for the new habitat. So that's my very focused effort at looking at the hydrology questions. So just to restate briefly, there's a need for the 10-year plan, which is from 2018 to 2028. So we're already almost in 2020, that 10-year plan. In the near term, we want to look at the observed data. We want to look at other sources of information. Specifically, we heard from the presentation just before the break. Tina Shields gave a brilliant overview of what IIT's been doing, and we've been using their modeling to inform our process. And then longer term, going beyond the 10-year horizon for the Salton Sea Management Program, what kinds of assumptions, what kinds of drivers do we expect for flows? So the reason we need to look at this for the Salton Sea Management Program is some of you probably know, one of the key elements of the program is the creation of these habitat ponds, shown with this blue. And because of the intended target salinity of those habitat ponds, they will be comprised of, the flows into them will be a mix of river waters, rainwater, and salton sea water. So we have to understand the water supply side, as I said, and we also need to make an assessment of the water demand side to be able to compare how much is available for. I'll be speaking more today to the water supply side, but you know, this context is important because it's driving the salton sea management. So the big picture concern is known to all of us. It will be reduced surface area of the sea, it will be exposed fire. But for our particular purpose, for the planning of individual layouts, specific habitat ponds, we'd like to know where exactly these exposed fire will be, because it's much cheaper to construct on dry fire than in wet soil. So it's a practical need to understand where the exposed fire will be. So this is the Alamo River. You can see where in the recent graphic 2017 where the exposed fire is. Likewise, the New River, this is where the fire is being exposed. For comparison, here's in 2005, and some of the new projects that are planned are indeed in this general. So that's what it looks like now, but we also need to have a fairly confident understanding of what it would look like in 2024, 2025, in some of these projects, when the designs for some of these projects will actually be implemented. So that's what's driving this particular evaluation.
Can you hold up the microphone closer?
Yeah, hard to hear.
It's on, right? Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the way we have to think about this is there are the inflows to the sea. That's pretty much driven by the watershed and what's happening upstream. And that includes mostly a lot of decisions. It's a highly manipulated watershed, as we all know, so there's a lot of decisions that are made. So there's that driver. And then once you have the inflows, the combination of salton sea salinity, the exposed fire, those are all interrelated. So as you have higher inflows or different inflows, that changes the salinity. It also changes the exposed fire, which in turn affects the evaporation rate and the salinity. So there's a lot of feedback between those processes. And what we have for this aspect, for the sea aspect, we have a salt and water balance model. This work has been done in years past, and IIB has recently updated that. It's called the SALSA model. I'll talk about that. And embedded in the SALSA model are assumptions on what's happening in the watershed, and that's something that we need to look at as well more closely. So one way, before we look at any modeling, is to look at the observed data. And here we have updated the inflows to the most recent available at this time. So as of starting from January 2014 to about last week. And what we see is, there are many changes going on, but the Alamo River flows are about similar to what they were in the beginning of this period. Whitewater, about the same, maybe a little bit higher, and some declines in the New River. So that's real world information, and that's something that we need to keep an eye on to better understand what these how these flows might evolve as in the near term. The SALSA model, which I mentioned, which I developed, really is focused on the on this water balance and salt balance in the Salton Sea. So that's driving a lot of our near-term calculations. And a principal input in salsa model are the inflows. And depending on what assumptions are embedded in those inflows, one can get very different near-term results and long-term results. But certainly, near-term, there's a lot of influence from the kinds of assumptions we see. And how do those numbers all line up? So this is a plot, again, current with the most recent observed data. These blue points are the elevation of the Salton Sea in AD 1988. For those of you that track this, this is not the data that's reported by the USGS, so it's connected for this more recent data. And so from beginning in 2015, we see this pretty steady decline in elevation every year. And there are a couple of assumptions on the flow time series that we are looking at, embedded in the salsa model. There's something called the low uncertainty, which is basically looking at flows that more or less stay near their current levels. And so that's the dashed line. And there's something called the moderate uncertainty, which assumes somewhat more of a rapid decline in the flows. So depending on what the flows are, one can get quite different responses in the sea. This difference between this moderate uncertainty flow and the observed data is about a foot. That's significant from a construction standpoint, from a planning standpoint. So that's the level of detail we're trying to get into. I know we're running a little bit low on time, but here we compare the flows as they have actually been and what's in the salsa model. There's a difference of about 90,000 acre-feet, give or take, depending on the assumption. Those are areas that we want to look at more closely. We want to be able to track those changes as we go forward. So each year we have better data and better insight into the Salton Sea. I'm just say no, we must out of time, but I want to highlight a couple of aspects. Here are the year of flows that are projected over the Salton Sea management plan period and the water demands. You can see how that compares. We can do this. We have done this for other locations as well. We can also look at the water demands from the Salton Sea for the projected acreages. And again, these numbers of these annual numbers of 8 to 10,000 acre feet, we can put that with the typical volume of the sea, if we know. And when we look further at this, the same salsa model can be expanded further to a 50-year time horizon to see how the elevation changes. That's there in the background, but that's not really an immediate purpose of our management plan. So to briefly summarize here, we recognize clearly the importance of the near-term changes in flow and elevation, and that's something we're tracking very closely to better plan our construction, to better support the construction activities, and then we'll be refining the fly estimates as we go forward. And then likewise, as the inflows, I showed you the inflows from the major rivers, but there are also several other smaller flows. And again, as we zooming in, we want to better capture those inflows, particularly as they pertain to specific project areas. And then longer term, there is a plan to evaluate what happens, but in a more systematic way using a watershed model that DWR has already been using as part of the water plan of the BEAT model. So I apologize for being very rushed through this, but it gives you an overview of how the Salton Sea Management Program is looking at flows. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sujoy. Next up is Dr. Ajami.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about, zooming out a little bit, looking at the issue of water resources management in general, using an integrated modeling framework. And of course, we could do nothing and continue business as usual in managing our water resources. So that's what we expect in the left, land degradation, exposed playas, or we could be smart about our, water management issues and use the latest technology, which we could continue, crop productions and food productions and preserve the environment. So, and to do that, we need to go beyond the scale of the field or just the lake. We need to look at the basin scales because, in reality, water resources are connected. There is surface water, there is groundwater, we have irrigated agriculture, we have urban users, and the goal of the management plans is that to essentially plan and management our water resources in a way that we could consider both the water quality as well as water quantity and also make all the stakeholders happy. And let's see whether we could do that or not. So the issue of water resources management actually is quite difficult. It's a multifaceted problem, and we have a range of stakeholders sitting across the table with different interests. Farmers would like to grow food and supply food to the growing population. Environmentalists, we want river flows, we want to maintain biodiversity and wildlife in the environment, but also we need water for the growing population and industrial demand. But these over abstractions, if we don't make any changes in the way that we use our water resources, for example, in terms of groundwater, could cause land subsidence. And the other issues that we need also to consider is the economic consideration, okay? For example, you see in the issue of Central Valley Aquifer System, plenty of groundwater, good quality to be used for agriculture, but over pumping has become expensive and caused land subsidence. And then there is the issue of the legal considerations. So we need a framework to be able to integrate all these aspects to make the stakeholders happy in the table. So the main part would be that we need to be able to quantify the water balance of a basin. Similar to our bank account, we want to know what is our monthly income is, how much do we use, what is our rent, how much remains in the storage, which is our saving account. And we don't want to, of course, deplete our bank accounts because, in this century, we could do that. Yes, with credit cards. So you'll be on debt and then paying that debt for a long time. But with the natural systems, we cannot do it. And to quantify these different components of the water balance, of course, we need observations. Stream flow gauging stations, the groundwater monitoring boards, we use satellite data, but all of these tools provide only snapshots about the environment at a single point in time. So we rely on, hydrologic models to make predictions, how the system works and actually predict what's going to happen in the future. So here is the Salton Sea Basin. So that is delineated. So it includes the Mexican portion of the basin, area of 22,000 square kilometers. Is a very dry basin. Average annual precipitation is about 220 millimeters. And actually, in most recent years, you can see that the precipitation has been below average in the basin. So most of the activities actually relies on inflow to Colorado River water, which is about on average 3.2 million acre feet per year. But this is the mean annual Colorado River inflow that comes to the Salton Sea. And as you can see, then again, in recent years that there has been a decline in the deliveries. And of course, this has important implications for a lot of activities that happens in the basin. And these dots on the map shows the groundwater monitoring stations or pumping stations, as well as USGS gauging stations that we could use to quantify the water balance in the basin. So Sujoy already showed the daily flows. Here I'm showing the mean annual flows in the Alamo River, the New River, and the Whitewater River coming from Coachella. And you see there is this natural variability, but there hasn't been a significant declining trend in the inflow to the sea. However, when we look at the lake level elevations from USGS records, there is this declining trend. And the question is, well, what's causing the declining trend in the Salton Sea? And I don't know if anybody has the answer for it, because there is no trends in the inflows. So, and here is the result of a hydrologic model simulations that was developed as part of California fourth assessment report. Here we show historic precipitation from 1950 to 2000, and here is the projected future for the late century, 2050, 2100. There is a lot of variabilities. Here I use 4 GCMs that are identified to be good for this region. You see there is a lot of variability, and of course, depending on what scenario you use, the variability could be higher. So we would expect that in future, actually, maybe the total annual precipitation wouldn't change, but we have these extreme events, so longer drought period, or maybe some large floods. But if we just look at the natural flow regime, it will also later on what's happening, in the past. And if you are looking at a more business as usual scenario, we would expect that maybe we would to see some large flood events in the basin in the future. But if you look at the numbers, the values of the natural runoff is very small. But there is limitations with all these modeling efforts in the system. First of all, we don't have enough observations. I would like to see that the entities that are involved install piezometers perpendicular to the sea to look at groundwater lake interactions. We don't have this data. Many of the modeling effort that has been done in the Salton Sea do not consider surface water and subsurface water processes. And also these models as part of the CalAdopt do not incorporate management issues, canal irrigation losses, and irrigation time. So what is the solution? The solution is that we are dealing with a highly managed ecosystems, and we need to consider both the natural components and the human systems both together. Believe me, the natural system is easier to model compared to the human behavior. We don't know what impacts farmers to decide what to grow this year compared to the next year. And we need to have this integrated approach to look at these important issues. So recently at UC Riverside, we got an NSF funded project, Food, Water, Energy Nexus, with our colleagues at Texas A&M and Professor Kershaw, who's here also one of the PIs on this project. And our goal is, we said we have the best case study in the region. Let's look at the Salton Sea to look at development of these coupled surface water, groundwater flow model, and link it with the economic models that we could develop a decision support tool to assess the impact of management practices and policy decision on water, food, and energy in the basin. I'm in charge of the hydrologic modeling aspect, and the modeling code that we decided to use is the soil and water assessment tool. It's a surface water hydrology model, has been widely used in a lot of agricultural settings around the world. And we plan to first set up the SWOT model for the basin and then use the hydrogeologic investigation data that has been done in 2004 by Lawrence Livermore to couple these two. So we're developing a coupled modeling framework to look at not only surface water flow to the lake, but also subsurface flow from the soil zone and groundwater to the lake or from the lake. Here is just a snapshot of this model. You can see this is a fully distributed model. We could examine management scenarios. If I change like crop type in this basin, what is the impact is going to be on the inflow to the sea. Here are the main irrigation canals in the system that are already incorporated in the model, so we could look at seepage losses. We cannot incorporate, there is a mesh here of all irrigation canals and things that we cannot look into. But our next step is to calibrate the model to match the observation and then simulate changes in lake levels and compute area of exposed playa. And we would be very interested to work with the stakeholders to develop scenarios as a result of what type of crops are you going to change? Are you going to change your irrigation systems? Because these types of modeling framework could answer the question. And finally, I end with the new initiative at UCR called All Water Initiative. We have experts at UCR that are a specialty on freshwater terrestrial ecology, water quantity and quality, and water economics and policy. So the 21st century water resources problem is complex, and we need to use the 21st century technology solution. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Doug, you can bring it up.
So while we're getting set up here, I was sitting in the audience in the first panel, and for those of you that don't know me, I retired about a year and a half ago. Sitting here in the audience, listening to the panel and all the great information they had, and the questions, the great information that they provided in the questions, I instantly regretted my decision to talk today. But talk I will, because I didn't want to embarrass myself or mine. I want to take a little bit of a different spin on the whole idea of water quality, but as it affects habitat development. And over the years that I spent doing Salton Sea research, I would hear all the time, just go get water from here, just get water from here, go get here, go get water. There's lots of it out there. Well, I've been saving this title for 15 years. All water is not created equal. And I'm going to try to demonstrate that to you to some extent today. So we all know the problem with the Salton Sea. We've all heard this. We've got declining inflows. And the problem for science and management is the question of how do you manage for all the values that we have for the Salton Sea with these declining resources, the birds, the fish, the societal values, when we're receiving less water. How do you do more with less? Well, I came up with the concept of spreading water shallow so that it does go further, cover more land, and addresses, we want to see if we could address all these values with just less water. The two key drivers for habitat management, not for the entire lake, but the ones that are most important for habitat management are going to be total dissolved solids, salts. And while we're on this slide, I want to point out that this is the Salton Sea proper, and thanks to Sujoy, he plotted all this stuff in some of the graphs. So from the Bureau Reclamation data set, you can see the Salton Sea itself at the 3 stations there's a gradual increase in salinity. Well, the important factor here is not only that the Salton Sea is way up here beyond 60 probably now, and my thumbs are too big. But I want to point out that the river inflows are down below this area right in here. So it's an important concept when we talk about water quality and the resources at hand that we have available. Right now, that's all we have to work with is what's coming in and what's in the lake itself. So you look at the other driver, which is selenium, and again, this is the Salton Sea. My eyes are deceiving me. The Salton Sea has the benefit of relatively low selenium. That's a good thing. We've wondered why for a lot of years, and we think this is due to all the biological activity in the Salton Sea. The microbes, the bacteria, the algae assimilate this, and then it all falls out and gets sequestered in the bottom of the lake. As long as you have deep water to deal with, low oxygenated water, the selenium stays sequestered. Okay, so again, a reference point is that we have low selenium in the Salton Sea. The selenium in the river water is up in this area between 5 and 10. And these are generalistic numbers. Please don't hold me to them, but they're in a general range. We have some drains that are in the 30 part per billion range. We have some that are in the 1 to 2 part per billion range. So as a general attribute, 5 to 10 parts per billion. Can we take this from a waste product, which has always been used as a dumping station? Can we turn this from a waste product into a useful resource? And I think we can. I think we've got a project that demonstrates by a project of blending water. So we take river water, in our case, we took the Alamo River, which was low salinity, and we blended that with salt sea water, which is high salinity. We wanted to target salinity of about roughly, I wanted 20 parts per thousand, but we've got to have some wiggle room, so 15 to 25 parts per thousand. It also takes those same characteristics of selenium with the river water that's moderately elevated in selenium and combine it with the salt sea water, low selenium. We want to get below the scientific threshold for adverse effects of 5 parts per billion selenium. We did that in a project, and the idea is that we can minimize selenium exposure. We can use, here's a key ingredient, a lot of people overlook. We're using salinity as a management tool. It's no longer a bad thing. In this case, we can use selenium as a management tool to suppress plant growth. And if you suppress plant growth, that affects things like the selenium, the dynamics of the selenium uptake cycle. I'll show you some slides in a second to demonstrate that. But if you also suppress plant growth, you no longer interrupt wave action. And wave action is death to mosquito larvae. They drown. And so you don't have a mosquito problem if you minimize the plants. And this doesn't minimize all the plants. It gets you down to a few key that you can then manage. Also, anecdotal observations by the Wildlife Health Center, you have lower rates of other wildlife diseases when you have salinities exceeding 20 parts per thousand. And it does this, and all the time, it keeps future deaths suppressed. So it's got lots of benefits to do it this way. The Selenium Cycle, typically in a freshwater wetland, you'll have this characteristic here, and so selenium is taken up from the sediments into the plants die, it becomes organic detritus, the bugs, the fish, everything feeds on everybody else, and it eventually all ends up in the birds. The problem is, there's bioaccumulation at every one of these trophic levels. And so by the time you get to the bird eating some of the stuff here, they're getting a very toxic bomb, a selenium dose. The key is, how do you prevent this uptake? By using salt as a management tool, we can sequentially eliminate a big part of the contribution to the selenium pathway. And the trick is, how do we manage the salinity to a point where we don't destroy all the biodiversity? So that the birds can land on this, there's nothing to eat, so why go there? That's the real trick in all this thing. We think that probably happens above roughly 100,000 parts per million, which is pretty darn salty. When everything disappears, the birds are not at risk anymore because it's not a direct ingestion of selenium. It's good for the selenium, bad for biodiversity. So why don't we just use direct discharge drain water? Why don't we just use direct discharge of water? Well, it's highly nutrient loaded, and we tend to get situations like this, where all that green water is algae. This is the old Torres Martinez site. You get this eutrophication that produces algae. Well, that's good under certain circumstances, but not for habitat management. And eventually, you get to this point of there's so much eutrophication that you'll get a swamp-infested overgrowth of plants, which with the selenium environment, you get accumulation of selenium, but this also exposes you to the mosquito risk and a lot of other things that you don't want to have happen. So our plan was to go to the southeast part of the Salton Sea. We built a project. We ran it for about 5 years. We made an evaluation of birds, abundance, diversity, nesting success, recruitment, use patterns. Tom Anderson with Fish and Wildlife Services in the audience, he'll talk. He was principally responsible for doing a lot of this stuff. We also evaluated sediments and aquatic invertebrate responses. And we got some amazing, this is as built, an aerial view of as built. This is a single figure 8 sweep from a dip net of Corixids. The invertebrate production is just off scale, which is what we anticipate. And my caution to anybody building habitat is, if you don't manage for the invertebrates, your project is going to fail. This is the foundation for the fish, for the birds. You manage first for the aquatic invertebrates. Then you overlay the habitat requirements of the fish and the birds to make the food available to them. When you do that, you get something like this. Very shallow water across the entire complex. Most ponds are built so that you have shallow water around the edge, and then it's deep in the middle, and there's only a few species that can take advantage of that deep water. We were told we had to provide for 17,000, I'm gonna make it up, 999 white pelicans, because that's how many we counted in 1998. We got white pelicans. I think if you expanded beyond our 100 acres, we probably could hit that target. Because it does produce fish. We got brown pelicans, and the brown pelicans actually used the site and fished in 1 foot of water. They were diving. We had several nesting colonies of black skimmers, and all these little bubbles. Okay, there's another great egret that's eating a fish, and that happens to be a very endangered desert pupfish. One of the side effects that we planned against, we tried to prevent desert pupfish, and we got them anyway. And on Project Closer, there was an estimated 1 million pupfish and 50 acres of habitat. So I call that a success. We know what the prognostication is, and the brown line is salinity. We're already at the cusp of losing fish. If we go much further, in a few years, we're going to lose some of the aquatic invertebrates, which is powerful. With the loss of fish, you're going to see a proliferation of aquatic invertebrates because the fish aren't eating anything anymore. And you're going to see more shift in the algal growth, the type of algae that you have. Eventually, over time, we're going to end up like the North Arm of Great Salt Lake that has no invertebrates. We'll lose the brine flies, the brine shrimp, which aren't even there yet, and we'll achieve that. So the accomplishments, we got tremendous avian biodiversity on basically 100 acres of habitat. We got the desert pupfish, and we know we'll grow fish. And if we manage it properly in the lower salinity cells, we can get different types of fish. We suppress plant growth. We got moderate concentrations of selenium. We manage the selenium risk. It doesn't disappear. I want to be very clear. It does not avoid selenium damage, but it minimizes it. And then byproduct of fugitive dust suppression. I don't have time to talk about all of the water not created equal, but basically all the existing water supplies are basically off limits. Now people are going to say, well, we can just go to the ocean and get water. You're bringing in 7 times more salt than what the rivers bring in right now. And unless you have an effective salt management program to go with this, you can't stop the inexorable decline. You might cover and prevent the dust, but you can't save the biology. So the thanks, we could not have done that project with all the various agencies stepping forward either with money or with logistical or moral support. And what I failed to do, because I'm retired, is I didn't include other key players in the whole thing. And it's important that I address that. So we have IID, we worked on their land for part of it, CBWD, Riverside County, Imperial County, the Farm Bureau, the Environmental Coalition, dozens and dozens of scientists. We had our own scientists, but we also relied on other scientists to do this. And I think I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think we packed in quite a bit in a short amount of time here. Just want to thank the panelists very much. I'm going to open up for maybe we can do 3 to 5 questions. Let's do 3 to 5 questions. Or who's going to ask questions? I'm going to ask. Oh, good. See Joan and then maybe John back. While we're walking back there, maybe Sujoy, if you can ask a quick question while we're getting the microphone to Joan. You mentioned that, or one of your slides is showing that inflows to Salton Sea last year were about 100,000 acre feet more than projected. Can you explain that while we're getting the microphones back? Very good.
So, I think those were projections made about 2 years ago. There were projections made 2 or 3 years ago. Embedded in those projections are assumptions on water transfers, how water might be recycled in Mexico. So, as Hoori said, I mean, this is a very human-controlled system. Didn't quite play out the way those assumptions were made. And that's something that we need to continue to look at in years forward.
Hi, so I want to assure Doug that he uses the question for the other two. The hydrology of the Salton Sea, including interaction with groundwater, has been studied in detail for over 5 decades, culminating in the State Natural Resources Agency doing a very thorough study from 2004 to 2006 that included a hydrologic model of the Salton Sea, a model whose median projection actually very closely followed what the Salton Sea has done since 2006. So my question is, in your work, did you look at that study and was there anything you found wanting?
I haven't seen any integrated modeling framework in our literature review. The only study that I've seen by the Lawrence Livermore National Lab that they developed the geological layering of the basin, looking at the groundwater, and then Argonne Lab just did a mud flow model for the southern portion. As far as and then is of course the SALSA 2 model. I haven't seen a basin level approach as in the domain that we are looking at. So I would be very interested to get a hold of that report and data.
Thanks, John. And so part of the SALSA model that John was talking about was the state's process back 13 years ago. And then CH2 and Hill developed the SALSA 2 model in conjunction with IID, which built upon and modified slightly the earlier model. But they were very different approaches. One is much more I guess we call it a hydraulic model, based particularly on Colorado River inflows versus a watershed approach. And I think this speaks to the need to bring in the academic community to help inform the development of these models, working in conjunction with some of the consultants and the state process, and perhaps can inform how the state's moving forward with their science advisory committees to bring in a range of experts to inform the development of these models, so we have a really better, or at least more fully informed understanding of what flows are going to be going forward, looking at not just the Colorado River flows, but the watershed as a whole.
So if you were then referring to the SALSA model, the assumptions as far as I've seen in the reports are based on statistical analysis of historical inflows. As the climate is changing and as the changes in management practices, historical data wouldn't represent the future because of the non-stationarity in the hydrologic time series. Although the statistical approach is valuable, but in the changing climate and a warming world wouldn't be suited for future projections. That's why we need physically based modeling frameworks similar to what we are proposing here as part of the MSF project. There are a lot of literature comparing this type of black box models compared to these physically based approaches. For example, if you change the cropping patterns in the Salton Sea, your SALSA 2 model wouldn't be able to predict what happens to the inflows because it's based on a statistical analysis of the historic condition. So now if you change your land use management practices, that statistical model fails to predict what's going to happen in the future.
Thanks. I think there's a lot of conversations we can have about how we actually develop a sophisticated model, because again, it's foundational for development of these projects. How much water we can have, and is that water going to be available, determines how successful those projects are going to be. Joe, who's next?
Yes, I'd like to thank the entire panel, very provocative and informative presentations. For you, madam, from UCR, you mentioned that there need to be, I think, piezometers to measure groundwater flows. And we know that CDWD is planning on reclaiming water that is now flowing through the Whitewater River. And so doing, it is asserting that groundwater levels will rise and that more water will be available to the Salton Sea. Is there a way to measure that? Is it being done now? If not, how can it be done to either verify or not?
Right, so there are some groundwater level measurements done, particularly in the Coachella Valley. As far as we can see in the public data set, if the agencies themselves collecting data, I'm not aware of that. The piezometer that I'm suggesting to put it in the eastern and western side of the Salton Sea, and of course in the south, in the IID area. So we could look at the head gradients, because it is changing, whether the groundwater is flowing to the lake or lake levels are higher than groundwater level. We don't have a good understanding of the directions of the flow at this point. And that doesn't cost much. Every pressure transducer costs about $1,000. If you give me $10,000, we could install those. And of course, I think you need a state permission as well to do the installation.
So the good news is that the doors are now locked and nobody gets out until we make contributions. So I think we're just going to have time for one more question.
Question for Doug Barnum. Do you recall what the levels of selenium were in each of the 4 ponds in the water column? And did you see any accumulation in the sediments during the time of operation of those ponds?
That's something I'd have to actually go back to the report to figure that out. I'm pretty sure that we did see accumulation in pond number 4. The original design was that we wanted to have a flow-through system from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and then out to the playa and back to the lake. We got caught in a situation with a hurricane in Florida when we were building the project. Now, what does that have to do with us out here? Basically, all the plastic pipe available tripled in price overnight because of that hurricane. I think it was Louisiana. And so we just couldn't afford project-wise to install the right diameter, so we couldn't get enough flow to go through our system to push it back out to the playa. That makes it a terminal lake, a terminal pond, and so we definitely got selenium accumulation. And in fact, when we lost our connection to Morton Bay, because of changes in management practice, we had to resort to pumping over the levee from pond 4 back into pond 1. Because at least in the water column, there were constant levels of selenium. But the report would address that.
So I regret that we're already over time. I think our panelists will be here at least the remainder of the day today, and encourage you to come up to them and ask them questions individually. But join me in thanking the panelists for their time. I think I'm just going to invite Carol and the next panelists up. Hopefully a quick transition here.